Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. My name is John, and I've lived on this beautiful riverfront property for over 20 years now. When I first moved here fresh out of college, it was just me, the winding river, and acres upon acres of untouched wilderness as far as the eye could see. The solitude was perfect for an introverted soul like myself. I treasured the tranquility and privacy of my little riverside oasis, where the only sounds were the gentle rush of water and the calls of birds. In those early years, my property felt like it was on the edge of the world. The nearest neighbor was miles away. It was the perfect writer's retreat for me since I made my living as a freelance journalist. I spent countless days seated at my desk, gazing out at the river, seeking inspiration for my next article. When I needed a break, I would go for long hikes under the cool forest canopy, write in my journal down by the riverbank, or sip a beer in my hammock with a good book. The simplicity and peace of it nourished my spirit. Over time, more and more houses started popping up along the river as the area became discovered. I watched with a tinge of sadness as each year passed and more civilization encroached upon my little natural refuge. Don't get me wrong, I didn't mind neighbors in principle, but I valued privacy and solitude above all else. Still, the thick woods bordering my property buffered me from the increasing development. For the most part, I retained a decent amount of seclusion thanks to the dense trees lining my land. That all changed the day Karen moved in next door. From the very first week, it was obvious she was going to be a problematic neighbor. Karen was a loud, obnoxious woman who clearly had little regard for anyone else around her. She lived in her tacky McMansion with her deadbeat husband and unruly teenage sons. I could hear her bellowing at her poor family even from inside my house with the windows closed. Karen seemed to think the whole outdoors was her personal stomping ground. She was constantly blaring music from her hot tub, yelling profanities during backyard barbecues, and just generally causing a ruckus all hours of the day and night. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt at first. Maybe she would settle down after the initial move-in chaos, I hoped. But as the weeks turned into months, it became clear Karen had no intention of being a cordial neighbor. I was an extreme introvert by nature and had come to cherish the peace and quiet of my property. I could no longer enjoy my usual riverside hobbies with Karen's constant disruptions. Simply being outside on my deck or patio became unpleasant and stressful. The noise pollution was bad enough, but Karen also seemed to go out of her way to invade my privacy. She would wander over uninvited and try to rope me into inane gossip sessions, wanting to know my business. It was incredibly frustrating and worrisome. Regretfully, I had never erected a fence or barrier between our properties. I had cherished keeping the land open and unfettered, but now cursed my past self for not delineating a clear boundary with this neighbor from hell. Karen seemed oblivious to basic decency and property lines, trampling over my personal space both literally and figuratively. She acted like it was her God-given right to use both our lands. Over that fall and winter, the situation continued deteriorating. Karen and I had a few heated arguments over her disregard for my privacy and peace. Her terrible husband threatened me with violence at one point, though I refused to stoop to his level. I lodged complaints with the homeowners association to no avail. I contemplated moving away altogether to escape. But this was my sanctuary. I refused to be driven out. In the spring, I headed up to my cabin in the mountains for a 2-week vacation to get away and recharge. The time away was restorative, the fresh mountain air and tranquility just what I needed. As I drove back down the winding rural roads toward home, my mood was lighter than it had been in months. I was optimistic that Karen would be less of an issue with summer on the way. People tended to spend more time away from home. As I pulled into my driveway, I was met with a horrifying sight that dashed my hopes. Looming ahead was the large steel frame of a giant red barn being constructed right on the edge of my property. Karen stood waving cheerfully alongside a team of construction workers operating noisy machinery. She sauntered over and announced proudly they were building an entertainment barn as a hangout spot for her rowdy teenagers. I saw red and immediately ordered her to cease and desist. But Karen just laughed airily, saying I'd come around to appreciating her gift to improve our adjoining properties. We got into a heated shouting match as I insisted she was trespassing on my land and demanded the barn be torn down. The construction workers stared uncomfortably until Karen shooed them back to work. I stood there fuming, feeling helpless as each new beam went up on what was clearly my property. That was the final straw. The next day, I immediately contacted my lawyer, Josephine. She wrote up an official notice informing Karen she was encroaching on my land, and that legal action would commence if she did not halt construction and remove the unfinished barn at once. I proudly delivered the letter myself, but Karen just tossed it aside disdainfully when I refused to back down. Over the next week, I conferred with Josephine as we put together an ironclad case to sue Karen over her brazen trespassing and illegal construction. Josephine sent her several sternly worded letters that went ignored. Meanwhile, the barn continued going up rapidly. I descended into a dark place, mentally and emotionally. This had been my sanctuary, my reprieve from the world. Now it was being torn away from me literally and symbolically. The construction noises drowned out the soothing sounds of the river. I retreated indoors, closing the curtains to block out the view of that hulking, half-built barn looming just yards from my back deck. I could barely eat or sleep, consumed with anxiety and anger. Josephine assured me the law was on our side. We had several neighbors provide sworn statements about seeing the barn built on my property. Another lawyer might have advised me just to settle, but Josephine was as fired up as I was about fighting this case on principle. The weeks crawled by painfully until finally our court date arrived. Karen hired an extremely aggressive lawyer and tried every maneuver to discredit and intimidate me. But Josephine was prepared for every obstacle. In the end, the judge firmly ruled in my favor. Karen had clearly trespassed and constructed the barn illegally on my land. I was awarded ownership of the half-finished barn since it was built with my property. Karen was ordered to pay all legal fees as well as damages for emotional distress. She was also sentenced to 6 months probation during which she could not contact me or set foot on my land. Karen's lawyer had to physically restrain her as she shouted obscenities at me, livid about her defeat. The judge threatened to charge her with contempt of court if she didn't leave immediately. I took small satisfaction in seeing justice served, but the bigger victory was regaining my peace and sanctuary. Over the next few weeks, I transformed that hulking barn frame into a beautiful gazebo overlooking the river. I strung up lights and planted lovely trees and flowers all around. It became my new favorite space to read, meditate, and soak in the tranquility of my natural paradise. With Karen banned from contacting me, her reign of terror over my property finally ended. Unfortunately, my relief was short-lived. A few months later, Karen started violating her probation by blaring loud music at all hours, trespassing on my property at night and threatening any guests I had over. I would often awake to find trash thrown all over my yard or threatening notes pinned to my front door. Back to court we went again and again over the next year, as Karen refused to leave me be. She would back off for a bit after each ruling, then start up her harassment campaign of noise and intimidation tactics all over again. Finally, after a drunk, raging Karen pounded on my door in the middle of the night and tried assaulting me, I was able to get a restraining order against her. The judge imposed the harshest sentence yet due to her repeated violations. Karen was sentenced to 6 months in jail, 5 years probation, and mandatory anger management therapy. The next few months as she sat in jail were the most blissful I can remember on my riverfront property. I could finally relax outdoors again without fear of being accosted. I started sleeping soundly through the night without disruptions. Nature's peace had finally been restored thanks to justice prevailing over my neighbor from hell. When Karen returned home on probation, she was much quieter and kept her head down, though the glare she gave me her first day back still gave me chills. Her husband had filed for divorce in light of her charges. Her sons chose to live full-time with him, too. Karen spent most days alone, scowling on her back porch, clearly stewing in bitterness but powerless to bother me further, lest she end up right back in jail. Occasionally, I'd spot her staring daggers at me while I happily went about my days gardening, reading on my deck, or strolling with friends by the riverside. But she didn't dare violate her probation again. Without her toxic presence disrupting the habitat, wildlife began returning to the river's edge near our properties. Ducks, herons, and beavers went about their business along the bank. Seeing their untroubled existence restored lightness to my spirit. My lawyer Josephine became a trusted friend after all we'd endured side by side. She'd stop by to visit, walking with me through the woods near Karen's old unfinished barn site, now overgrown and returning to nature. Hard to believe that bitter battle all started here, Josephine reflected one day while we sat admiring a family of turtles sunning themselves on a log. I breathed in the cool, earthy air, so grateful for the sounds of water flowing and leaves rustling instead of construction ruckus or shouting matches with Karen. It was worth every sleepless night and court date to get my sanctuary back, I replied. I'd endure it all again just to sit peacefully with you here today. Josephine gave my hand a fond squeeze. After losing myself in anger and frustration back then, I'd regained perspective on what really mattered. Over time, seeing how content I was seemed to diminish Karen's antipathy. Her scowls were replaced by wistful gazes at me tending my riverside oasis. One day I was shocked to receive a letter of apology from Karen. She expressed deep remorse over all the pain and conflict she had caused. She explained that envy had driven her actions back then, envy toward the humble fulfillment I derived from nature's simple gifts. Karen wrote of her intention to move away for a fresh start, hoping to find the wisdom and maturity I had exemplified. I wished her well, and promised to send pictures of the local wildlife if she kept in touch with small steps to rebuild trust. The next one is a pro-revenge story. A-hole tailgates me when I'm already speeding, so I set them up for a speed trap. I was driving home from a get-together and was going 65 to 67 kilometers per h, 41 miles per hour, in a 60, 37 miles per hour zone. Where I'm from, the police almost never pull you over if you're going 10 or less over, but will definitely pull you over for anything over that. All was well until I got closer to my area. It's less city-like and more rural, with the roads alternating between single and double lanes. I'm on a single lane, speeding 10, 6 miles per hour over, when a pickup truck in my rear view caught my attention. They were going a tad bit faster when they caught up to me and promptly braked a meter behind me. I was like, okay, I'll speed up to 70, 43 miles per hour, no big deal, but they continued to tailgate me. Upon closer inspection, I could see the mug of a very angry woman who had no understanding of personal space. What ensued was a full 5 minutes of them completely obscuring my rearview mirror with how close they were. I was tired and kind of hungover, so I really was not in the mood to be worrying about a potential car accident, thanks to her driving. I was going to pull over to let her go around when Waze gave me a heads up that a police officer was reported up ahead. This was when I decided I'm going to dole out some karma. I slowly dropped my speed from 70, 43 miles per hour, to 60, 37 miles per hour, now at the speed limit. This woman was furious. Why she just didn't pass me, I'll never know, but she was literally going slightly over the midline, yelling to herself in my rear view, flashing her full brights in a weird show-offish way to get me to go faster. I did this for another minute before Waze showed the cop was less than a km, 0.6 miles away. I put on my turn signal, very slowly pulled over, and watched this woman flip me the bird as she whipped past me, disappearing over the hill, now going way faster than 10 kilometers per h over. I continued on my way, getting up to 70 kilometers per h, 43 miles per hour, when I cleared the hill to see flashing lights ahead. Jackpot. I drove with anticipation until I got close enough to confirm it was my friend from earlier. Not wanting to miss out on hitting her with our new secret greeting, I dropped down to 60 kilometers per h, 37 miles per hour, peered over, and flashed the bird back at her. I hope you enjoy the ticket, Karen. The next one is a petty revenge story. I used to work in a call center where everyone had little cubicles. You could chat with people on either side or behind you if things got slow, but anyone on the other side of the divider was somewhat hard to see or chat with. Only important because Karen was in this hard-to-see location from me. I have issues with overheating, medical stuff. I like to sit right under the AC vent. Nobody fought me for this because it was a little too cold for most people. Well, being a woman, this meant that sometimes I had some nipple protrusion issues on some days. It's perfectly natural and to most people not noticeable because it was under my shirt plus bra. Karen noticed this and made a report to HR. The HR woman and my direct supervisor paraded me through the cubicles and into their office to question me about my nipples. Now, I could have thrown a fit about this to begin with since we didn't actually have a dress code and it's none of their damn business. They asked me to prove I was wearing a bra, so I showed them the straps. They told me good enough, basically, and told me to go back to my desk. I refused to go back. I said I needed to file a complaint about someone. They asked me who I was reporting. I said, I don't know, but you do. I want to report whoever it was that's been staring at my breasts all day. Now that I know someone is staring, I feel like this is a hostile work environment. They acted like I was joking at first until I said, if you don't have a talk with them, I will go over your heads and report you for forcing me to reveal my bra to you. I got escorted back to my desk, and Karen was sitting there looking smug until they escorted her to the HR office instead. I don't know what happened to her in the office, and I didn't care. They did their part by having their talk with her. All I really wanted was to know who did it. Since it was a very slow day, all my coworkers started asking me what that was all about. Office gossip, you know. I told everyone exactly what had happened and added that Karen must be fascinated with my breasts since she noticed. Everyone else confirmed they didn't even notice. When she came back from HR, every person in the room knew what she had done and was glaring at her. Snitches didn't get stitches and didn't get fired either, but they got treated like the Karen they were. Nobody would talk to her, people would be chatting, see her come try to join the conversation, and go silent and turn away from her. Some people did loud whispers and made comments like, "Shh, don't say anything, she will report you." She quit about 2 weeks later. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This happened about 8 years ago, 1 year into just my first job, paid internship clerking gig. I don't know what to call it. The firm that I worked for had a part-time program for law students, so they could work and gain experience while in school, very common in my country. I loved my job. I was very grateful for the opportunity to learn and grow, and I really enjoyed the work I performed. The thing was, I had classes both in the morning and the afternoon night, and my school was at a different side of the city, about 8 miles away, which could turn into hours of traffic during rush hour in a city with 8 million inhabitants. So my days looked pretty hectic. Something like this: 5:30 to 7 o'clock, get ready and drive to school. 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, class. 9 o'clock, 10:00-ish, drive to work. 10:00-ish, 17 o'clock, work. 17 o'clock to 18 o'clock, drive to school. 18 o'clock to 22 o'clock, classes. Then I would try to study for 1 hour after class, and I would often eat while driving. During my first year in the program, I had more than proved myself and earned my place. I was that 19, 20-year-old idiot, type A overachiever who knew no boundaries. I had worked weekends, pulled all-nighters. Literally, I would leave school at 10 p.m. and go back to work. I worked full-time in the summers without more pay. Anything I had to do to keep the associates happy so they'd keep teaching me. As I was wrapping up my first anniversary there, the perfect storm of awful rolled around. On the academic front, I started a new semester, and twice a week in the mornings, I had a teacher who was awesome but would finish class 30 minutes late. On the work front, a new partner joined the firm. Let's call him Mr. A-Hole, AH for short, and kind of took over as the unofficial managing partner. He was the typical old-fashioned lawyer who should be extinct by now. He could barely use Microsoft Word to type a contract and would pass out at the sight of an Excel sheet. He had this weird obsession with punctuality while simultaneously being late to everything. Plus, he moronically believed that by having a bunch of people warming up chairs, he would magically make money. So instead of investing time in client development, he would just spend endless time and effort on bullying everyone around the office. To make matters worse, since other people spoke highly of me, he decided to pay special attention to me. Unsurprisingly, shortly after A-Hole joined, the firm started struggling. Now he could have tried to get new clients, send quotes by the deadline, and show up to meetings on time. But no, of course, the firm was doing poorly because U.S. clerks did not spend enough time warming up the chairs. So he became obsessed with us getting there by 10 a.m., especially me. The issue was that I could not get there by 10 because my teacher finished class late, and there was no way I could drive across the city in rush hour in 30 minutes. So A-Hole called a meeting with all the clerks and yelled at me in front of everyone because I was always late. More like 2x a week, but whatever. The fact that I had gotten permission from the program committee did not matter. The fact that I was working 6 or 7 hours every day while I only had to work 5 did not matter. The fact that I would work weekends and late nights did not matter. I tried to explain, but he kept yelling at me and would not let me talk. Having had enough, I left the conference room straight into the office of every member of the clerk program committee, 1 junior associate, 1 SR associate, and 1 partner, to say the same speech. I am late because I have class. I have proven my commitment to the firm, but my education is important too. If being 30 minutes late twice a week is too big of an issue, feel free to fire me, but I am not leaving class early. Then I went to my desk to do my work. I guess the committee informed other partners, and word got around about what was going on, small firm, because as I was getting ready to leave for school, A-Hole came fuming to my desk and told me, "I know you are lying. From now on, I want to know where you are at all times, and if I catch you slacking off or lying, you are fired, and I will make sure no one will ever hire you." So, cue malicious compliance. The next day, I woke up extra early, 5 a.m. sharp, took a time-stamped photo, and sent it to both his email and phone. Since I could not risk him not getting it and him not knowing where I was, I sent a time-stamped photo every 5 minutes, captioning what I was doing as if it was my own personal social media platform with one follower. The cherry on top was that my teacher had worked with A-hole in the past and obviously did not like him very much, so he let me take photos during class and diligently send them to A-hole. I even went as far as taking a photo of the toilet door with the text peeing, and then a photo at the toilet flushing, all done. While driving, since traffic was really slow, I would send a photo and include how much I had moved during that time. Sometimes it was something absurd, like 100 feet. As soon as I sent a photo of me at my desk, he showed up saying that he got the point, and I could stop. A couple of weeks later, he simply stopped bugging people and started working from home or locking himself up in his office. My guess is I was not the only one to complain, and the other partner realized how dangerous he could be for the firm and asked him to back off. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.